Everybody, welcome to this episode of Marketers Clubhouse. I'm Jamie Calon, your host. We're continuously sort of working on trying to understand all the different industries where marketing touches business and where business interacts with consumer. All these things are marketing centric. Not long ago, I believe it most likely be the episode before this, I sat down with a really good friend of mine, Justin Cutting, who's on the episode again today. Justin, welcome. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
We had referenced our guest today, Devin Cooper. And Justin had brought him up as sort of a shining example of a musician who had analytically taken a look at how career trajectory could work and how instead of just sort of shotgunning music out into the world, there's a little bit more of a strategic approach that could be had. Some of the big guys out there have exceedingly good luxury of having a giant fan base, and they don't have to grow. I was really lucky this past weekend. I got to go see U2 at the Sphere, and that's a perfect example of a music group that is obviously transcended having to grow a consumer base, although they still want to grow their consumer base, but they have amassed just this insane volume of humans where they can, go to the Sphere in Vegas, open the thing as a new facility and sell out night after night after night, 17,500 people. It's crazy. It's a different tier of thing. But music, and specifically good music, doesn't exist just at a giant fan base. Just because you got a giant fan base doesn't mean you're amazing. It can be, you can be great and have a giant fan base, but hell, back in the day that, there was Milli Vanilli and there was all these terrible things out there that had fan bases and they were nothing but bullshit. So today we got Devin in to talk about his career. I've listened to your music. You're great. I am a Canadian country fan, although newish to it. It's only been the last couple of years, 3 or 4 years, where I've actually started really listening to Canadian country. And honestly, country in general. And so I'm really happy to have you. And I'm really looking forward to sort of talking about this. Justin, I want you to sort of kick off the first few questions. Before we get there, Dev, can you give us a little brief history of where you come from, how you got to where you are today, just sort of like, ages 0 to the start of your career? What did that look like?
Absolutely. Excuse me. Grew up in Innisfil, Alberta, small little town, and my parents didn't really play music, but there's always music going on in the house. So from a young age, I was always surrounded by music. And I guess, I remember being like 2 years old. We had like the Beatles anthology disc and throwing that in and just cranking up the intro riff to Day Tripper. And there's just something that fascinated me about music and guitar. And I don't even think I knew what a guitar was at the time. But then fast forward, I guess, just a couple years, I was 5 and I started begging my parents for a guitar. And music had obviously had a significant impact me on that point to start begging for a guitar at 5 years old. So they said, you're 5, in 2 weeks, you're going to want to do something different. So save up your money from birthday and report cards and doing chores around the house. And eventually you'll have enough money to buy your own guitar. So 2 years passed and I was begging and begging and begging and saving my money. And finally I had enough to buy my own guitar. And then I walked out Christmas morning when I was 7 and there was a brand new shiny black electric guitar sitting there with an amp, but it came with a condition that I had to pay for my first 6 months lessons with all of that money that I had saved up over the past 2 years. And so that was kind of the start of being involved in music, I suppose. I think about 6 months before I got my first guitar, I went to my first concert, and it was Nickelback in Red Deer. They were on tour with Stained and Three Doors Down. And it was the day of the show that we got tickets, and they were front row, general admission, no seats on the floor. So there's my mom and this, like, it was in September, so I'd have been 6-year-old kid, front row at the Centrium in Red Deer for this rock show. And I think that was kind of like the tipping point for me of, okay, I know I want to do this now because I'd actually got to see it live. So start playing and had a fantastic guitar teacher in Innisfail. they called him and said, "Hey, we've got a 7-year-old that wants to learn how to play guitar. Would you be interested in teaching him?" And he said, "I don't teach 7-year-olds. They don't have the capacity for it. Their fingers don't have the strength. It's just they're too young. Bring him back when he's like 10." And my parents were like, "Well, we just bought him this guitar for Christmas, and like he really wants to learn it." So he said, "Okay, well, let's give him 3 weeks worth of lessons. We'll see how it goes, and then we can go from there." And after the first lesson, he was like, "Yeah, he's not going anywhere. He's staying on as a student." And
I love it.
so I was very fortunate to have a good teacher from early on that inspired me and probably didn't teach me the conventional things that you should learn when you're first starting guitar, but taught me things that inspired me and taught me how to play songs that I wanted to learn how to play from music I'd listened to. And
isn't that just the key in so many things? Hey, right there.
Absolutely.
And I want to say something first. Shout out to your parents for the slickest move ever by making you save money to buy the guitar, but then forcing you to spend it on lessons. That is probably one of the best, slickest little pieces of parenting I've ever seen. Justin, pick up on that. That is
it's there. I'm way ahead of you.
That is a masterful.
Actually, Devin, we've changed our mind. We're actually going to have your parents on the podcast.
Yeah.
Call them in.
I'm sure they would have some interesting stories to tell.
Wouldn't all of our parents?
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
So, I guess there I am, 7 years old, starting to play guitar, and I'll just hit on a few like little highlights that kind of happened throughout the journey up to this point, because I could talk for 2 hours about the next 10 years of life after that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my first show, I was like maybe 7.5. I'd been playing guitar for like 6 months, and I went to my grade 1 teacher, grade 2. I think it was grade 2 I was in, and said, "Hey, can I bring my guitar to school? I want to play some songs for the class." She was like, "Yeah, sure." So I brought my electric in, and I'd learned like the intro to Back in Black and Smoke on the Water and Iron Man and like all those classic like first guitar songs. And I don't remember this at the time. I remember seeing video of it afterwards. The teacher started singing along to one of the songs, and I like stopped mid song, was like, "Sorry, this is my show," and then like kept playing. It's like 7 years old.
You were meant to be an artist.
Oh, it's amazing. Excuse me.
Yeah. So sorry, Mrs. Westrade, if you ever see this.
Amazing.
But yeah, I started playing guitar, and just absolutely loved it from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed. If I wasn't at school or doing homework, I was playing guitar. I'd get out of bed in the morning, still be half asleep, pick it up, start playing. They'd have to tell me to stop at night to go to bed. And when I was about 13, I started playing in a band with some guys in school, and myself and 2 brothers, and played a bunch of classic rock covers. And our shtick was that we all played each instrument, so we swapped around. So we had a 15-song set. I'd play 5 songs on guitar, 5 songs on bass, 5 songs on drums, and we'd all alternate. And that was like our little shtick we had. And so we did that for a few years together. And then when I was 15, I guess I started writing my own tunes. And that's kind of when I really got into writing and figuring out what I wanted to say. And at the time, it's like, you're 15, you don't really have a lot to say. So I just started either making up stories or writing stories about living in the log cabin that we lived in or things like that. But they were always a story that I was writing. So this will come back later, because I grew up listening to Southern rock and country. Sorry, not country. Southern rock and hair metal and blues. And I love rock and roll, but most of the time the lyrics don't make sense. So I always wanted to write something from day one that like had a story, and you could like live in the story or either like tell a message of some sort.
Mm.
And so I started writing my own tunes. And then when I was 16, I booked some time at a recording studio to record these songs that I'd written, but I hadn't really started singing yet. So I figured if I'm going to record these songs, I should probably learn how to sing. So I found a vocal coach. Actually, I went to about 5 different vocal coaches, and none of them could figure out how to get me to sing. It just like was not resonating like that first guitar teacher did. Finally found one fantastic singing teacher in Sylvan Lake that was like, "Well, why do you want to sing? Like, what's the purpose of all this?" And I was like, well, I have these songs I want to record. It's not just that I want to sing along to Broadway tracks or things like that. I have these songs that I've written. So she made me bring my guitar in, and we just worked on those songs and got those songs up to the level that I wanted them to be at, and kind of took an unconventional path towards that as well so that I could achieve what I wanted to. Anyways, recorded that record, started playing acoustic shows, got a gig in Red Deer, playing at a bar when I was 16. Pretty sure they thought I was 18, so I had a monthly residency there when I was in high school. Played every second Thursday night or something like that for a couple of years. Had won a radio contest. Again, I was 17, snuck into the bar, won the radio contest. You had to be 18. And it was actually the night before my 18th birthday that the finales were. Ended up winning the contest, won some radio time with a studio in Calgary, which is what ended up introducing me to Justin. He was the bass player that was brought in to record on the session. And that then took us to the next step of the competition, where they put two bands head to head with the songs that they had recorded. The winner got to open for Lou Graham, A Foreigner. And then my first full band show happened, and I was like, well, I don't know any musicians, but I know this guy and this other guy that played bass and drums on the recording. So I called them up, and then called a keyboard player I knew from Red Deer. And that was the start of my first full band show when I was 18. And yeah, went to college in Calgary for 2 years for power engineering at SAIT, finished that program, and then was still playing music throughout the program, but was like pretty focused on that because it was something that I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. Get out of college, go back home to Innisfail, and walk into my dad's shop. He builds custom cars and motorcycles, and my mom is a registered nurse at a continuing care facility. So I walk into the shop and go to talk to my parents and say, hey, I don't think I'm going to get a job for what I went to school for. My dad goes, oh, what are you going to do? It's like, well, I'm going to pursue music full time. He's like, okay, well, there's still bills to pay. There's still rent to pay here. So how are you going to do that? And I was like, well, I'm going to work at Napa Auto Parts, which is where I'd been working through high school in Innisfail. I'm going to work there long enough till I can get enough gigs that I can go full time just playing music. So then the following year after that, between like 20 and 21 years old, I was driving back and forth to Calgary every day, working 10 hours a day, playing shows every night, just trying to get enough gigs that I could make enough money doing that. And in 2018, quit my job at Napa, moved to Calgary, and have been full-time music since then, and turned around writing tunes, playing songs. And last year we just got to release my debut record.
Well, that's an insane story, and I love to hear it. The commitment's amazing. Justin, did you catch any lies in there? Are you going to call bullshit on any of that story, or is that accurate?
I don't even know where to begin. No, honestly, actually, that's there's a lot of things that I'm hearing for the first time as well, which is fantastic. I don't know how we haven't really started from the beginning of the journey in any of our conversations over the years, but yeah, I loved it. I was just enthralled as you were there, Jamie.
Yeah, I love it's funny because I have instead of a guitar, I begged for a bike. I begged and begged and begged. And I started bike racing, and like I went through like very similar path. My parents couldn't afford anything. My dad was a teacher, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom taking care of us. And like I remember going my first week in high school. I was a good athlete, but I was a terrible student. I was going to St. Mary's, which was right downtown Calgary. And I remember my dad, because I was a terrible student, went to my elementary school as a teacher, my junior high as a teacher, and my high school. And I know it was just so that his son made it through school, because I was a knucklehead. And he did a great job on getting me through. But the first year in grade 10 at St. Mary's downtown, in the first week, I remember coming back to school, and my dad was like, okay, well, we're going to leave at 4:00, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, actually, I got a job. I got to go to work. And he's like, what are you talking about? I go, yeah, I got a job at a bike shop just down the street. And he's like, what? And I go, well, how else am I going to afford bikes, Dad? I want bikes. I want bikes all the time. And he's like, you just went and got a job? I go, yeah, I went and got it at lunch. And so I just literally went down and met the guy who owned this bike store, and he gave me a job. I was making $4.50 an hour. And I was like, the happiest kid in the world. I was going to be able to afford to buy bikes and all these things. And so that like, it's an interesting thing because there's no dream that ever came through with just like it instant. Well, there's, I'm sure, a few, but like nothing happens instantly and you roll through. It's just a bunch of menial jobs and grinding your way through it. And so I always love to hear it when it's other people, because in my head, everyone else just gets everything really easy. And it's so nice to hear when it doesn't just happen that way, where you're like a guy in a small town, you have to buckle down and do it all on your own. And there's tons of good breaks, but tons of bad breaks, and lots of like mopping the floors and doing that kind of stuff to move through.
Yeah,
Justin,
absolutely.
yeah, like Justin, I got to assume your story isn't too far off. Like you had to grind to get to wherever you are. Like I have zero doubts about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember the moment when I decided I wanted to be a musician. It was I was in grade 4, and there was the junior high talent show that they made all the students at the school sit through, and I saw a couple kids in grade 7 get on stage and play songs. I don't remember if it was good or not, but I do remember being restless that night. Like, one day I'm going to be on that stage performing in front of my school with my
Mm-hmm.
friends playing music. And I didn't start on bass guitar. I started actually in Calgary Boys Choir,
Attaboy.
and I wasn't loving it. So my parents wanted to put me in piano, and I said no, that's not cool enough. So and I should have done it,
So you
but then they
picked the
bought me a
bass
guitar.
guitar. No.
Well, that all happened by accident though, because they got me a guitar instead, because that was cool enough for me. So I do guitar for 4 years, and actually I liked it, but I didn't love it. I was not obsessed with the instrument, but it was around, and so I had to kill time doing something. So I just pick it up and practice whatever my teacher had showed me to practice. And it was in grade 7 when we had mandatory band class. It was not optional; you had to take it in grade 7. And I go in, and they rifle through the list of instruments that we can pick from to study for the year. And I'm looking for guitar on the list because that's what I know, but it's not there. And I didn't want to play any brass instruments or any woodwinds or anything like that. And so I'm looking, and purely out of laziness, I see that bass guitar is on the list. And I look over at the bass guitar, and like, I'm pretty sure like the notes on that are the same as my guitar at home. So then I don't have to learn anything. So like, that'll be easy. Oh, bass guitar, sure. Just check
Love
that
it.
box. And I got it. And within months, I became like wildly obsessed with the instrument,
Hmm.
and sold my guitar, put the money towards a bass guitar, and never stopped picking it up and obsessing over it for years and years and years and years. But
Interesting.
I didn't mean to get into bass guitar.
I didn't know that that was the transition. I didn't know that that's how that had happened.
Yeah.
Now, can you play all the other instruments like Dev as well, or are you just bass guitar only? Or
The only other
do you got
instrument
drum
that I
skills?
can, I that's the other instrument that I can play. I used to play like professionally, but I haven't taken a gig on drums in, oh, I don't know, probably 5 years now. It's been a
Do
long
the
time.
does bass and guitar transition over because they're similar things? Oh,
Oh, nice
look what's going
balloons.
on in the
That's
background.
lovely.
How did I make balloons? I love it. Balloons.
You're that excited about my drum skills, hey?
Boom. If I thumbs
Um,
up, I think I get thumbs up. Yep, there you go.
oh, look at
Yeah.
that. Yeah, no, I actually don't think that it transitions over as easily as some people might, but that's just me. I think if you're gonna transition from one instrument to the other, guitar translates a lot more to bass than bass, obviously, to guitar because
Mm,
of the amount of notes you're playing at any given time. But no, they're two different worlds. The approach has to be so different.
mm.
To me, bass guitar is one of those instruments that's very easy to learn relative to a lot of different instruments, but very hard to master.
Mm.
And yeah, anyways, that's totally getting sidetracked because I want to hear more about Devin's story personally. Um,
Yeah, when we were chatting, Justin, you were discussing sort of like the present sort of career, and we'd gone through the discussions of, and you brought up a number which I've literally talked to about 20 people about, which is that sort of 1,000-person number, where it's like, hey, if you want to grow a career, you need to kind of hit this tipping point of fans. Just for people who didn't catch the last episode, can you summarize that really quickly?
Me?
Yeah, you,
Yeah. Okay.
Justin.
Well, what's funny is the person I heard this from is actually Devin.
Oh, there you go.
Where if you can secure 1,000 real fans, you can essentially secure a career for yourself that's got longevity, that has an income that you can absolutely live and thrive off of, um, and you can base a career, like maybe it's not, you know, wealth and fortune and fame, but a career off of
Mm.
having 1,000 real fans.
Devin, where did you get like? Okay, so this came from you. Where did you get that number? Like, how did that come about?
That was a Seth Godin thing that I had heard years
Okay.
ago that was basically finding your smallest viable market. Like, who can you find that's going to resonate and invest and be a part of your product and be a part of your team and your army? And what's the smallest viable market you need to make it thrive, to make it work, and to provide something for them?
Mm.
And his number was always kind of 1,000 that he talked about. If you can have 1,000 people that are invested in what you're doing, whether that's financially or emotionally, or like they resonate with your product and are a consumer of what you do, 1,000 people can consistently consume your products, you can find a way to make a viable career of it.
Does your brand need some help in the trade marketing department? Manage your sales tools with Regulator's easy-to-use features. Whether it's fixtures or displays, POP, custom art or promo products, you can submit single or bulk orders for all your locations within minutes, using a simple, streamlined process. Deliver content, manage your budget and view the market, all from the palm of your hand. Move up to 10 times faster than your competitors and capture all the opportunities that put your brand on top. Visit brandregulator.com for more information.
It's really interesting because in the last, I don't know, couple weeks, I've got a bunch of different companies, and one of which is a wine cellar company, a wine racking company. And I was always kind of fiddling around. All the marketing and stuff I do is all for giant brands. Like Oakley has obviously more than 1,000 people in its tribe. Obviously, U2 has way more than 1,000 people, and like Red Bull and the different companies I deal with. Obviously, that number is so insignificant to them. But I've always struggled with like what's the most viable number to try to achieve, just to have a good cottage based lifestyle industry, something that would support, 1 to 3 or 4 people in this small lifestyle thing. You're not going to be rich, but you can have a great life. You can probably afford to do most of the things you want to do. And though you'll have a small number of churn, which is customers dropping out and new customers coming in. But if your product is consistently good, the number should, once you get to 1,000, continue to go. It won't go exponentially, most likely, unless something really abnormal happens. But up until that point, I've never heard that 1,000 number, which I find actually from a product standpoint a really interesting thing. Whether it's music or whether it's super dope wine racks or a new sunglass company or something, I started thinking. Actually, I was in Vegas. Was just talking to Justin. I was in Vegas to see U2 at the Sphere this weekend, and I started thinking about this over the weekend one night when I couldn't sleep, and it was like that number actually might be a really applicable thing if the cost of your product is low enough and you can keep the consumer purchasing more things. Is there, with that 1,000 number, is there a product turnover and average price of it, which wouldn't necessarily perfectly apply to yours, but is there an average spend per consumer that you try to achieve out of that 1,000 group annually? Like, that's got to be a thing.
It definitely would be a thing. It's interesting that you say that. That's not actually something that I have dove into yet, as we're just starting to release music and doing a lot of hard ticket shows. It's kind of finding the value of how many people do we need per show to make it a viable show? How many people do we need? How much merch do we need to sell per show to offset other costs? And it's kind of at a fluctuating rate right now, where it's kind of like not a trial and error, but a testing area to see what the draw is we can get in each market. And I guess it would be it's different as a musician maybe because, or as an artist, because you're traveling around. So you're not necessarily a stationary business. You're like, well, we want to sell tickets in Edmonton, we want to sell tickets in Toronto, we want to sell tickets here. So is it 1,000 people in all of those markets? Is it 1,000 people overall? And I guess then that the question changes from if you're just selling records via your website or if you're talking about ticket sales in person, and how that kind of changes.
It's really interesting. And Justin, I think you guys are onto something that should probably be drilled down upon, and you could literally write a book on this if you really wanted to. One, I think there's an insane hunger from young artists to understand what the real matrix is. Devin, there's a rock historian who's a DJ and runs an amazing show. His name's Alan Cross in Canada, and he does this alt history rock show, and it's unbelievable. And Alan sees it kind of from his perspective, and he talks to all these very large bands and does history on all these people. But he didn't have a perfect, although he knows a ton, he couldn't narrow it down to a formula. And I actually somewhat believe that there isn't a formula for everything here, but there's probably a really amazing base. And it would look like, if you're a single performer, songwriter, singer, whatever, however you want to phrase it, 1,000 global fans buying digital music will produce X. And if that same 1,000 fans could buy baseball hats, t-shirts, pins, all the merchy sort of stuff, that gets added on. And then you can calculate a value per fan based on this global thing. And that's exclusive from live shows, because if you had 1,000 fans, the likelihood of all 1,000 fans being in a single location like Calgary or Innisfail or whatever, like you might have inordinately more fans in Calgary. But if you go to whatever, Regina, to play a show, and there's 20 good fans there, and the bar has done a good promotional thing, you still might get hundreds and hundreds of people in to see this, even though they're not your specific fan base. They'll promote into it, which you would hope for. But it seems to me that somewhere in here lies what I've been trying to dig at for the longest time, of like, how does a young musician calculate likelihood of its success based upon a small sample group, the kids in your class? All the kids in my class loved it. I played at this one coffee shop, for 2 weeks, and the crowd got bigger and bigger and bigger. And you can then extrapolate that over larger things with streaming, audio, and websites and all this other stuff, and larger venues. And there's got to be a way for a young person to look at this, even if it's within 50% accuracy. That's so much better than blindly doing it. It's like, I kind of need to shoot in this area. And I think that there's some interesting marketing tricks and certain things that can go with that, which I would love you guys to continue to figure out. I don't have the time to, but I think you two can figure it out. No problem. You both seem real smart. So chop, let's get at it, get out those calculators. But all kidding aside, I really feel that for the new artist, just a new artist, young or old, whatever they may be, there's some magic in that. And it seems less doom and gloom than trying to be a star. No one's like, the likelihood of someone becoming an insane global superstar and selling out stadium after stadium after stadium is probably a fairly small percentage. It's my guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
But to live a beautiful life, be able to raise a family and do what you want, well, that's actually way more attainable than most people would ever imagine, is my guess.
Yeah, absolutely. It's nobody talks about you're either a starving musician or you're like a billionaire. There's never talk about like the actual like middle class working musician that like has a great life and gets to do a lot of really cool things. And that's a conversation we have all the time, because you show up to places and people go like, oh, like you're surviving, and it's like, yeah, like things are going well, and it's like, well, like one day you'll get on like those big stages. And I think that's always a goal to get on those big stages, but people don't realize that you can still make a living with a fan base and make music, and there's a whole category of those middle class musicians that are working and having really good lives that people don't talk about.
Yeah, they own houses and brand new F-150s and like, you know, motorbikes and you know, have a great life. Not everyone's Kid Rock with a duplicate of the White House in their backyard, you know, like that's not everything, right? Like that's and I feel that because of the skewed stardom in music, that it becomes sort of, to your point, a little disheartening. Like you said, you're either Nickelback out of Hannah or you're nobody out of Hannah. And that's not a real fair thing, because there's probably other musicians that have come out of that town that are playing right now that are doing okay. They're raising, you know, they're making enough money and they get to do what they want to do. And doing what you want to do is 1,000 times better than not doing what you want to do, regardless of the economics of it. And I, like Justin, I see you nodding. I got to assume like you're a person who's found a way to live in music in so many different ways.
Well, dude, shout out to Lisa Dodd and Sean Watts from Hannah, Alberta, who tour around with Gore Bamford and make a good living, just, you know, quote unquote jobbing it in the industry, and they're crushing it. That here's the thing: I think there's a massive danger in just in missing out on the middle class of musicians in terms of wanting to build a career and what you're aiming to do, because if you just see it as like, okay, either I'm going to become a massive star or this is all a bust, well, then the only focus you're going to have is creating something that appeals to everybody. But I think we all know the dangers of creating something that appeals to everybody. What you end up with most of the time is something that appeals to nobody. And so when you are shooting for that middle ground and just going for minimum viable audience, now you know who to create for. And you're not trying to impress everybody. Now, you might be surprised by how many people you impress, and it could be 1,000 times more than you thought. But at least you know what to aim for, and you know what to create your brand around. And that's a huge thing that I think Devin has gotten really right in his approach, is he identified his consumer. And what I'm curious about in terms of that journey of identifying your consumer is, and also just to expand on that, now you know that you're creating a product that isn't trying to impress everybody, but is trying to impress this one narrow band of people that you're trying to make into real true fans. You're trying to add to that pool of 1,000, turn it into 2,000, 3,000 over time. And like, did you, in terms of the refinement process, did it come from trying to create a way to please everybody and see who came out of the woodwork and then identify that person when it seems to be this type of person over and over again, so I'll just target them? Or did you go, well, this is who I am and this is who I'd like to perform for, so I'm going to identify that person according to what I enjoy and create for that person? Or was it like, I know the story I'm trying to tell, and I think that my story is going to resonate with this type of person, so that's a very algorithmic. My story is X, the person is Y, it's a good fit, let's do this. What did that process look like?
I think it's probably actually a bit of all three, because there's different ways that you're doing audience testing and market testing, whether that's like Facebook ads that you put to a large group of people and then you see who responded out of that group. Cool. We can take the data from that of like, this was a massive pool to all country fans in these locations. And it seems like the demographic that responded was typically this. Cool, that's good to know. And they typically responded in this area. Okay, good to know. Mark it down. Playing shows. This is just my story. This is who I am. I'm just showing up as me, saying what I have to say. Who is organically showing up and who's sticking around and who is coming up and talking to me after, who is buying merch, who's asking more questions. Go around the bar, introduce yourself to everyone. You can kind of see who's in and who's out. And again, it's like, well, make a mental note, write it down. That's what I saw at this location. And it's going to change based on locations of shows. If we're playing Nashville North to 5,000 drunk people that are between 18 and 30 realistically, there's going to be a demographic that is enjoying it there because of the environment that they're in versus actually being like a return customer who's going to want to invest in what I'm doing. The 18 to 22-year-old people at Nashville North are going to love the show. It's like, whatever, big guitar solo, standing up in their face, all the stuff. But is it going to turn them into people who are going to buy $50 records and books and t-shirts and invest in what I'm doing? Maybe, but they probably are just drunk and enjoy the live show and party, and they don't really care who's playing if somebody just puts on a good show. And then it also comes down to like seeing who organically, just through posting on social media, starts following along. And you can kind of see, based on the stats that Instagram and Facebook and Spotify and all those things have, when you release music, if you're fortunate enough to get on an editorial playlist, that's a big testing ground. Basically, Canada's Country is a testing playlist to see who in Canada that listens to country is going to like this music. And you can see how many people have followed you after you being on that playlist, what their age range is, whether they're male or female, and where they're located. So you can see that if they're trying to appeal to all country fans in Canada, and there's 70,000 listeners on the playlist, and you've retained 50 of those listeners. Well, that 50 that you've retained is super valuable data, because it's like, those are the people that actually looked at who you were on the playlist, went to follow you, clicked the follow button, joined the journey. And the rest were just passive listeners that it didn't necessarily make an impact.
From brand development to simple market executions, 54 Blue helps brands of all sizes grow with sustainability in mind. Their full stack range of services include print, fabrication, design, web, interactive, content marketing, brand consulting, creative strategy, and more. Join some of the world's largest brands and lean on 54 Blue for your next go-to-market. Visit 54blue.com for more information.
It's interesting. I sat down with the head of brand for the sunglass company Oakley last year. He's an acquaintance and a friend of mine, Brian Takumi. And we spoke very in depth about tribe and creation of tribe and its effectiveness. It's beyond fandom. That's the consumer that's when we're talking 1,000 fans, we're really talking about 1,000 people within a tribe, people that will go deeper than just like fans are kind of a casual thing. People that jump in and they're all in. They come to the show with your last show's t-shirt on. That's a tribe member, and it's a different thing. And the real mega brands are always looking to cultivate tribe members. And if you can convert 1 in 100 to a tribe member, your economics are exponential with those tribe members versus the fans, because the fans are easily swayed to another sunglass company, another energy drink, another whatever, another country musician. Although music is one of those beautiful things where you can be a tribe member of 20 brands, right? Yeah. Like I can be a fan of all sorts of musical brand and not feel like I have to be 1,000% married in always. I can be married in to this tribe, but still love the Rolling Stones. Like that. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, you see that cross-pollination. Like I saw almost as many Rolling Stones t-shirts at the Sphere on Friday as I did, U2. Like there was it's a thing. Yeah. It's like this weird cross-pollination that exists. And so music is a strange one with that, but it's interesting that you've dug down so deep into that. And I'm curious, and you don't have to give me an exact, but like, what's your age demographic? What's your age at now? How old are you, my friend?
I'm 27.
Okay. So this makes a bunch more sense to me because your savviness with understanding, one, not only just the tech and the ability to understand like the younger than you doesn't really care as much about demographics as your age group. The next step up from you in generation cares about the demographics but doesn't understand the tech. And so they kind of struggle with it unless they're smart enough and gritty enough just to go and actually figure it out and learn some stuff in life. But you've got this like really interesting handle, especially for an artist, because these are traditionally, I'm going to assume, distasteful topics in the art circle. The painter doesn't want to talk about the price of the painting. He wants to talk about brush strokes. He doesn't want to talk about the demographics that his painting is trying to reach. It's gaudy. It's, all of the things that you don't want to be as an artist. However, to be I always look at musicians as a really interesting thing, because your art needs to be consumed to be able to move forward. Unless you're already wealthy enough to not worry about it, or you just don't give a shit and you live in a cabin, whatever. But if you want to be a functioning business with it, you have to care about that. And I just don't really see a ton of my interactions with musicians has never really included that discussion a ton. It's always the art. And I love that. But it always seemed kind of weird and unrealistic to me. So I love the fact that you're like really involved in your own business.
Yeah.
And your business is separated from your product. You can produce beautiful art as an artist, but then put on a different hat and go, now I'm a businessman, and now I got to understand how this art is selling, who it's selling to, and how to maximize the profitability so I can buy a new F-150, right? Like that, like literally like, oh, I've got people to feed. How am I going to do that? And so to me, that's a really interesting thing, because I think, I don't know, just, am I wrong? Like in like my window into the music is so much smaller than yours. Your window is it? Most people don't want to address this because they're either afraid of it, don't understand it, or think it's tacky to talk about the commercialization of their sounds.
That's a good question. In terms of, what motivates people to not want to think about this stuff, I'm not too sure. I've seen what you're talking about a million times over, though, where there's just, there's people with this insatiable, really compulsion to need to create whatever their art is. And what it comes down to is how you want to facilitate the perpetuation of that art. And so in some cases, maybe you do just want to work at Napa 9 to 5 as a way to pay the bills so that you can just keep creating art on the side, and you're actually not too worried about whether it actually blows up or not. And in Devin's case, it's like, well, I love doing this. I don't want to do anything else. I could, but I don't want to. So I guess I need to start thinking about these things so that I can have the best of both worlds. I can continue to create the art, but I can also have that art be what drives the ability to create more of it. And so I don't think it's a tacky conversation. I don't know if people are necessarily afraid of it. I think it's just a little bit of maybe it's naivety, honestly, where people think they have that kind of mindset where if you build it, they will come. And we talked about this a little bit last time. It's like, oh, I built this great song. People are going to think it's a great song. Well, I'm not saying you're wrong, but you're one of 600,000 songs that got created today and released today. So what's the actual plan? There has to be a little bit more to it in terms of creating a way to facilitate the further creation of more material moving forward. And if that ends up being working a 9 to 5, then great. But in Devin's case, he didn't want a 9 to 5. He wanted music to be the thing that facilitates the creation of more music. And if that's what you want, then you have to think about it the way that Devin's thinking about it. Or you just get really lucky.
Yeah, the really lucky thing is bullshit. I'm like, sorry. I literally, like, if anything's taught us anything with all the, like, America's Got Talents, The Voice, all these different shows that exist, there's a million super talented singers. There just is. They're there. You could barely throw a stone on TV without seeing someone that your head just explodes with. You're like, oh my God, they're amazing. And if luck was a real thing that was in abundance, well, there'd be just all these superstars out there, because there's lots of technically amazing voices, but all the package doesn't exist. There's so much more to it, in my opinion, than that. And the legit suffering, and this doesn't mean like suffering on a bicycle climbing a mountain, but that's literally how I had to train my instruments to be an athlete. And it is actually legitimately just suffering. Like you just sit there and your supercomputer in your brain is overriding your limbic system that runs your body and saying, no, you dick, you keep going and go harder. Don't slow down, go faster. And your body's like, no. And you got this battle in your head. You guys, you're doing the same thing. It's a different suffering, but it exists. Any creation of art, produces this inner turmoil of suffering. And I think that one, I think that's generally the path for most real things. We don't see it, but everybody is a 10-year overnight success. It's so rare that there's someone that's literally actually just an overnight success. You brought up Nickelback, Devin, and I actually am a fan of Nickelback. I think they're great.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Yeah, they're awesome. My wife loves them. It took me a while for her to convert me. I'm a fan of all types of music. I was being held back by the same stigma that holds everyone else back from saying that Nickelback is awesome, but they're awesome, and I think they're great. How long were they playing music before they actually blew up? Like that, to me, it seemed like it was overnight. There was one day there was no Nickelback. The next day there was literally Nickelback. And I'm in Calgary, where they were literally blowing up here before they were blowing up anywhere else. But I'm sure it wasn't overnight. I'm positive, in fact, it wasn't overnight. It was probably quick at that point, but those things don't really happen. Like it's fairly rare. In my
absolutely.
opinion. So I love that. So, and Justin, I bounce weird music stuff off you and Instagram all the time. Well, a few times. And I am getting more music through weird little feeders of social media, new stuff. Like I stumbled across, they're called the Red Clay Strays. And I think they're out of Alabama or something. That's the last one I sent to you, Justin. Do you know them, Devin?
I've heard the name. I know I haven't listened to any of their music, but I'm sure I've heard the name.
Yeah, and they're super unique. Like they're different, but like this weird band rolling around the US. They're very magnetic. Their content is insane. They're really attractive, outwardly speaking, as far as their stage energy and stuff. And their content is great. Go take a peek at them.
I will for sure.
But they they've got 150,000 followers ish on Instagram. They're opening up for relatively large US acts. They were completely hidden to me. Like they even if they would have come to Calgary at some point, the likelihood of me catching that at any given point, if they were just rolling through as a 1 night or 2 night show, would have been 1 in a million for me to actually catch it. But I got bombarded by them within a 2-week period on social media, and I was by like looking at your stuff, looking at all these other things, and the algorithm started feeding me like, hey, top 20 content or top 20 country songs that you have to know, and like just these random list things. And I'm like going through and I'm like, nope, what? Yep. Then I go back and it's like, whoa, okay. And so there's, to Alan Cross's point, and Justin, you had mentioned this too, there's such an like this omnidirectional, you got to hit everything at once, and you got to try get on these different lists. And you're like, if you can get on one of those lists from some content producers that's got, all he's doing is producing lists of amazing music, but he's got a million followers, or 500,000 followers. Well, that's a list you want to be on. And so these types of things have to be hard to do. Do you approach, like in my business, I call it whale hunting, where I approach a customer that I really want, a big one, and I just target really directly at like, I want to, we did this with a couple of our large marketing companies where it's like, we want to do work for this company. And we just started whale hunting them, just going after all the low level targets until we got up to VP status. and then started doing projects for them. Before you know it, we're taking over a huge part of their marketing business. Have you started that specific approach? Is that something that's on your radar to do? It seems effective. Hell, it gets me, like, it introduced 3 or 4 different bands to me in the last month that I would have never come in contact with. Is this an approach that you're actively working on? Is it something that just happens organically?
I think it's a bit of both. There's it's interesting. A lot of the lists, depending on where you're at, like, of course, you can pay to have a feature in Rolling Stone magazine. You can pay to be on things like that. There's ways to get onto those major lists and ways to get on to those highlight reels non-organically. There's also ways to get on them organically, and it's the I don't think that there's a right or a wrong way. There's just different ways and different approaches based on how you want to do things. There's obviously like I work with a publicist out of Ontario, and she does a lot of outreach. So when we're coming up to a release cycle, she's reaching out to every magazine, every press outlet with information on the new single and what's happening. And there's some lists that pull you on, some that don't. And I think it is mostly organic. There's obviously, like I said, pitching towards getting to those lists, but it's like the long game of continuing to show up. There's like the biggest list on Rolling Stone of the top 10 country artists this year. Most of them are going to be people that have been showing up for a while. They keep showing up. They keep getting their name in front of their face. And it's really the long game of, same with radio. You show up as an independent artist. That's nice. We're not going to play your stuff because we don't know if you're going to leave after this song. Are you never going to release something again? Show up again with another song. Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember he was here. Show up again with another one. Oh, yeah, it's good to see you again. They still haven't played anything yet, but now you're building the relationship that's going to allow them to invest in what you're doing because they know that you're invested in continuing to show up. And I think that maybe I derailed from the question.
No, you're actually right, you're bang on, dude. That's actually amazing. Like that makes sense. And Justin, back to your point, I made one amazing song. That's a reason that doesn't work. That's actually probably a fundamental reason why that doesn't work. And I would have never thought of that, but the relationship between the person that can play the music versus the person that produced it, I never for a second, I would have thought that the Alan Crosses of the world would just listen to it and go, this is a banger, I'm putting it on the radio, I love it. But not for a millisecond did I think, I've never seen this guy before, or girl, or band. I don't want to support some weird one-hit wonder. I don't know who they are. I'm just going to put this on the back burner and just hold off until I see something else they do, and maybe we can go back to it. Which I've never even thought about. Like, that's actually super interesting advice, because you got to keep showing up.
Yeah, because you haven't, with one showing up one time, you haven't given them a reason to care yet. There's no reason that they should care about what you're doing. There's like a million great singers, like you said, a million great guitar players. There's a million great songwriters. There's a million great songs out there. So like, what are you going to do as an artist that's going to give them an experience that lets them invest in what you're doing? Are you going to keep showing up? Are you going to remember the conversations you had? How are you going to make them feel when you show up to deliver your product?
Yeah, that's super interesting. I love that, actually. That backfills some of the missing pieces in the marketing that no one has ever told me, which, Justin, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Well, and that actually, that kind of leads me to the broader networking thing. Like, when you are looking to build relationships in the industry, do you have, a matrix by which you're targeting certain people or certain elements of the industry in a certain order? Are you, ensuring that you show up at this thing and this thing and this thing to talk to that person, that person, that person? Or is it just like, wherever I am, I'm just going to try and make friends? Like, what's your strategy to making sure that these relationships are being strategically fostered and developed?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I can't stand running around an event and having to try and talk to 20 people because I feel like I have to talk to them because they're there, and I need to make sure that they know I'm there so that they can remember that they saw me there and shake hands and go to the next person. It's just like, it's so ingenuine and sleazy feeling to me.
Yeah, it's tacky as shit. It's terrible.
I can't stand it. If I'm going to have a conversation with someone, it's like, most of the times it's not really about what they're doing at work. It's like, we've had this conversation, Justin. It's like getting to know someone. It's not about necessarily what they can do for you or what you can do for them or telling about all these great things you're doing. It's like just having a conversation with a person and getting to know them. Because at the end of the day, it's all about relationships, and you just want to build relationships with good people. And by just having a conversation with people, whatever level they're at, you're going to know if they're a person that you're going to want to associate yourself with just by chatting with them about life and seeing what they have to say and what you have to say, and not necessarily focusing on what you're trying to get out of them, because that doesn't get you anywhere.
No, it doesn't. And it's interesting though, because I'm a firm believer that every relationship, your relationship with your parents, your relationship with your wife, with your children, with your grandparents, with your business partners, with your clients, all of them are transactional at one level or another. Sometimes the transaction is love. Sometimes the transaction is economic. The transactional doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. Every relationship that exists on this planet is transactional. And it's funny because I'm reading a book called Your Ego is the Enemy. And it's a very great book. And one of the things in it is a little thing about Bill Clinton, one of the past presidents in the US. And Bill, when he was starting to come up, would keep index cards on everyone he met. And he would, he started with, like one. And before, when he was done, when he was running for president, he had this index card list of like 20,000 people. And every night he would go through the list and he would pluck out people in the list, and he would either phone them or write them a letter just to stay in contact, to see how they're doing, to understand how the kids are, to see how their business is doing, all these different things. And it was genuine, but also self-serving, because when he went to run for president, all of these affluent people that he'd become friends with over the year, he had stayed in contact with them. He didn't necessarily know why. He was just a young man who was like, you know what? I met a really cool person. I'm going to stay in contact with this person. And the low cost value of writing him a quick note and mailing it off is nothing. Or to pick up the phone and just call him and be like, hey, Frank, how are your grandparents? Last time we chatted, they weren't doing great. And it worked all the way to the point where this dude runs for president. And of course, he was crafty and he had many, many, many affluent people on that list. But, hell, if it didn't work, like, it worked. And it's such an interesting thing to put value against that, but in an authentic way. There was nothing inauthentic, like even explaining the reasons why he did it and how technical it was with like note cards. And he would write notes on it and be like, last time I talked, son was at university, or, kid in prison. There's nothing inauthentic about that. It's organized, it's logical, it's very clever, and it's simple, and yet hyper effective. And I think that's a really again, in a world where I believe everything is transactional, one way or another. It's an interesting approach, and I don't think there's anything inauthentic about that. A good artist has to know who he's selling his stuff to. A good artist needs to understand who they are and probably know who your super fans are so that you can communicate with them, because those are your people that are going to go out and be, power selling you to other people, which is huge. Absolutely. So, yeah, I find, I don't know. Again, I believe real art is a business in every variety. Doesn't matter what it is. All of it.
Yeah.
And so,
we are in the music business.
Yes. and I literally love that. I told Justin this on our last podcast. I'm a fan of The Voice, and I was watching this year's season, and Reba's on it. And one of her artists literally in one of their one-on-ones was like, how do I make it in music? And she's like, well, it's called the music business for a reason. And she just went into this little tirade about being a business person. Like, your art is one thing, the business component of it is a completely different thing. And not being abused, not abusing people, like, you showing up on time. If you're not 5 minutes early, you're 10 minutes late. Like, you can't do that. You have to present yourself as this thing, and you're producing a product that's there to entertain and all these other things, which means you got to bring this whole package, from the outfit through to the perfect music to the handshakes at the end. Everything counts, all of it, and nothing is off the table. And so, I don't know, I find most people, again, just get blurred between being an artiste and being an artist that sells their product as a business. So it's super refreshing to hear you two talk about it, because I don't know, I just haven't heard many people talk about it as a straight business practice from like a real artist perspective. Justin, you've got it nailed, because you have to treat it as a business. You're in multiple versions of music: studio artist, band leader, selling musical things, which both me and Devin are wearing, the in-ears that we've got in today. You approach it as a business, but there's so many different sides to it, which I find amazing. Like, Devin, I'm a very amateur singer, and I've got a music coach. Well, she's in the music business as well. She's like, that's what she's doing. She's teaching people how to be in music. And whether it's the people teaching at the School of Rock, or any of these little musical places that exist, well, hell, if they're not in the music business, Long and McQuaid, guess what? Music business, right? Like, it's all there. The guys who make picks, well, music business. If it's a real great pick, well, they're going to do great. It's not all evident, and it's all not in the spotlight, is my guess, and shouldn't be. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, oh, go ahead, Justin.
So, well, I really want to hear your answer, but I actually have a sound check to get to. So, speaking of the music business, I need to participate in it. And so I'm playing a show tonight with Kissel in Victoria, and got things to do. So,
all right, buddy. Well, Godspeed to your gig tonight. Do great.
We're not here for the high rollers, snooty wine critics, or long-haul collectors, but we do think it's about time wine cellars turned into swoon-worthy works of art. Our experienced designers will bring your dream wine cellar to life, fitting any sized space and aesthetic requirements in your home. Our craftsmen carefully hand-build your cellar to give you a wine storage space that really feels like you. Visit themoderncellar.com for more information.
Devin, I'm going to keep talking to you for a few minutes.
Yeah.
What, when you're moving through gig to gig, and you're plotting sort of your merch sales and these things, how do you predict? Like, do you just buy like wads of merch and move through, or do you have a formula now that kind of works as far as like, how many t-shirts, how many hoodies, how many of this stuff? Did someone help you do this? Is there resources for that for younger artists?
There is resources for sure. There's actually one program that's been a massive help to me. I took it in 2017. It's called Canada's Music Incubator. It's based out of Toronto. Have you heard of it before?
No.
Okay. And it's run in partnership with a label out there, Coalition Music. So it's Canada's Music Incubator and Coalition Music, and they do a program called the Artist Entrepreneurship Program. And it's an 8-week program. They run it in Toronto, and then they run it in Calgary as well. And they actually just finished the latest AE West program. Last week was the final showcase for it. But basically, they take, I believe, 8 to 10 artists in for 8 weeks, and they bring in industry professionals, lawyers, publishers, and basically give like a crash course on how to be a musician and how to have a music business, because there's no book on how to have a music business or how to plan the trajectory of your career if you have any control of that at all. Again, there's a lot out of our control, but there's a lot of things that we can control, and what opportunities we can set ourselves up for. And so that program was a huge help for me that I took in 2017. It was only about 6 months after that program that I was able to quit my job and go full time. And but back to the merch thing, there's a lot of valuable information I learned from them in there in terms of creating products that you think your consumers will like. Again, it's finding that customer profile and what's that ideal consumer going to want to purchase from you. Are they going to want to buy a t-shirt? Are they going to want to buy a hoodie? Are they going to wear trucker hats? Like who is your demographic and what would they typically want to buy from you? And at first it was just order a ton of merch just to have stock. I just have to have something. Long before I had any music out, I was selling t-shirts. That was kind of my thing. I had a few different designs. And as I started releasing songs, I started doing t-shirts that kind of matched each song. So if I didn't have a record out, I'd have a t-shirt that would go with it. And it's like, you can't buy a CD, but you can buy a t-shirt with the song on it. And it's still in a trial and error phase of figuring out how much merch to have, how many options to have. Because if you have one option, the person buys your shirt at a show and then they come to the next show, you've still only got one option. There's nothing left for them to buy.
Yeah.
You have 8 options. You could put them in option paralysis where there's too many options for them to decide. So they decide nothing. And it's kind of finding that balance of how do you have enough product and continue changing it so that there's always something fresh for them to buy. So you have a couple staples. I have a couple shirts that I've used forever at live shows that I keep refilling stock of. And then I kind of have this like rotating selection that like as songs come out, we'll have like a new shirt that comes out with the song. And that's kind of like the new flavor. They're able to get it for this amount of time. And then it kind of goes away and it doesn't come back after that. And it's
right.
But it's a constant trial and error, I think.
So are you holding like thousands upon thousands of dollars worth of inventory and you've got you're trucking this stuff from place to place, or are you taking a small selection of this with you and you've got backstock? Like, I'm sorry, I'm a product guy.
Yeah,
so this is kind of a wacky question, but again, I was at U2 on the weekend, and obviously there at the Sphere, it's really easy. They just have shit tons of merch. They're never out of anything. They would be crazy to be out of anything because they're doing a mini residency there. However, I went and saw The Cult not long ago, which was amazing. And by the time I got up in line, half their stuff was gone. Nothing in my size. So I ended up with like a weird something, but it was great. But it seems always very impossible to judge. Like I couldn't even imagine, like I deal and I've owned lots of retail stores and I help large brands make decisions on how much product to hold in some instances. And it's easier when you're at fixed location because you can project based off past sales and stuff really easy. But moving from space to space, the demographics of consumer change so much that it would be really hit and miss, and it would be very difficult to do that. What do you do when you get too much? Do you blow the stuff out? No,
I've never blown out merch. I've always kind of held at the price that I've had. I've been fortunate that I haven't put in a ridiculous order that's left me
hanging
with my hands tied kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I believe I have a total of 8 different shirts that I'm selling, which is a fair amount for realistic, like a small independent artist who's playing shows that are at max 5,000 at a festival or something like that. And for myself, it's like 200 to 500 kind of thing is the typical range. So that's a lot of option for that amount of people there.
Yeah.
I have a fair amount of stock at home that I keep, and then I kind of have a traveling tote that I go with. And I take typically about 4 shirts of each option of each size to every show. So that leaves me, if everybody buys, and that's where I'm at right now, it'll increase as the shows get bigger and things like that. But that's kind of what I found works right now. If I sell out of a large in all of these styles, well, I've still got a large in 6 or 7 other styles that's available. So I'm not leaving them with no option if they want a large shirt.
Right.
And that has has shown to work to this point. I'm sure there's much better methods than what I'm doing, but I've had great success in selling merch. My per cap numbers in terms of amount of people there to amount of people buying merch is typically really good. It's between like $2 to $5 a head I'm getting at shows, which is great. If you can have 200 people there and you're getting $2 to $5 a person kind of thing at the end of the night, that really helps kind of build things and helps move things forward and get more advertising out there. It's just free advertising if you're selling shirts to people.
Yeah, I think it's huge. One of the things I was thinking about when I was in that lineup for the cult trying to get merch is there's a few shirts that I wanted. I knew that they had inventory, just not on site. Like, they have inventory for the next town or whatever. I thought it interesting if when the shirt sells out in a certain size, they could potentially pre-sell you that, give you a small discount or pay for the shipping, and you're basically buying it online at that point. And it's like, we will have this delivered to your house, scan this, boop, boop, and this thing just goes through and you get your merch. I've yet to see anybody do that correctly.
It's funny you say that. So I actually learned from another artist friend of mine in Calgary that's no longer a band. They used to do that. They would have a couple things available at a show, and then they would have their website. And I've kind of adapted that approach as well, where I have everything I have in stock at the shows, and then I have my online store. The online store is completely drop shipped, so I don't touch anything. So if people want to buy things online, it's drop shipped. It doesn't pull from my inventory at home. I don't have to ship it. I don't have to handle it. Obviously, less profits to be made on drop shipped items, but less to deal with as well. So there's a win and a loss and everything, obviously.
It's a straight win, dude. Trust me.
It is a win.
It's a straight win. Yeah. It's not a loss. It's a straight win.
Yes.
Yeah, because all the intangibles of hauling the extra inventory, having to move it, all those things, inventory gets damaged as you move it and hang it. Like even if your margin is 20% less on that web sale,
you didn't do a thing.
You didn't do a thing, and it's a straight win. You have another happy consumer, which leads me to, like stuff like, and I, again, didn't see it even with you too. How come there's not hand tags with their full merch store, like where you can QR code directly to their full merch store right there, right then? And it's just a tag on the shirt.
Yeah. That
tag is probably the value of that. I bet you 1 in 5 get scanned. And I bet you out of that 1 in 5, like once you get to the store, you're going to get a 10 or 15% conversion off of a hang tag, which is huge if you're selling enough merch to do it. And those hang tags are worth 20 cents per shirt. It's funny because it just seems like there's this like really simple technology that exists nowadays to be able to further that, like in just stuff you don't want to take. Yeah. Like I love dogs, and I've got, like Devin Cooper dog bowls that I think are dope that, you feed your dogs out of. And it's like, yeah, we've got 10 of them in stock on our web store. Well, you're not going to bring those to the concert, but
no,
hell, there's 10 people that probably think those dog bowls are dope and, buy those things. And it's just the industry, again, I think it's artists not thinking about business when there's potentially low-hanging drunk fruit right in front of you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
like drunk fruit is the best. That's where the shopping channel gets you, drunk or sleepy.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I've been drinking wine and bought something off of Instagram. Almost everything I've ever bought off Instagram, I've had a glass of wine in my hand and I'm like, yeah, sure, that looks amazing. And it's like, it's a thing that shows up 6 weeks later. And I'm like, sure. Okay. Like 50-50 on whether it's going to work or not, but
totally,
it's fine. And not that you want to take advantage of that, but that's literally a consumer that's out there being taken advantage of by every single brand on the planet. So why not a good musician? And I just, I find it interesting that you've got such a analytical business approach against, your art, which I love, because you're not different. So the guys, again, I'm really connected to the sunglass company Oakley, have been for my whole life. And they don't talk about their sunglasses as product. It's art. Some of them are commodities, but you talk to them about anything. they talk about the curvature, the lines. They talk about it like it's a sports car, dude. It's crazy. They go to insane detail on all these things, and it literally, for the designer that does this, it comes out as a piece of art. And then they're turning it and commoditizing it, but it's still art. It doesn't matter. The Nike shoes that you probably own many pairs of, as do I, to the people who design those things, they're straight art. Like it's like, yeah, it's a commodity. Yeah, it's a giant thing has been built out of it, but it's art. All of it is.
Yeah,
the only company
absolutely.
I would consider that's not, maybe is, like Coca-Cola, Red Bull, like sugar water is a little hard to consider art. However, beer is art, wine is art. All like those crafty style spirits are, and there's literally nothing wrong. The in-ears that we're wearing right now that Justin and Simon are commercializing, they're art. 1,000,000%. 1 million. So I don't know. I just it was really refreshing to hear Justin talk about you, and I wanted to meet you. Yeah, I'm psyched. And I do a really great party out. I just had my wife's 50th out at my ranch. A ranch is a bold word, giant acreage, outside of Cochrane in the foothills. And we had Ben come out. Chase. Amazing. And I built a real nice stage off my woodshed. I had saws and stuff. It was a beautiful country stage.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to do that party. It's a very expensive party, as you could imagine, with a full band and, brisket being catered and all those things, and a few hundred people. It's the price of a wedding. But I'm going to try to do it every couple of years. So I'm going to be reaching out through Justin to drag you in one day. Maybe if I get lucky, you can come out and sing some songs for us. I'd happily pay you to come out and show us your craft. Would be amazing. If you'd be so inclined, I'll bug you one day. Dude, I'm a fan, and I'm a growing fan, and you can consider me someone who's going to be listening to all your music moving forward. So keep at it and keep grinding. I love it. Oh, did I lose you?
Yeah, now you're back.
There you go. I don't know how much of that you caught, but I want to have you. It's a big
party.
Yeah, it's a big party, and we always have live music. So next time I'd love to pay you to come out there and sing some songs for us and entertain.
Would love that. Would love to be a part of that.
I love it. Keep at it. I only love, there's not much I love more than music. So, and if I could live my fantasy, I would be doing your job, not my job, because my fantasy is to be a musician, although my skill set does not support that. Although I'm working on it. I believe I reached out to a friend of yours to be a vocal coach, and she never got back to me, but I believe she was on tour most of the summer doing her craft. So I'm gonna reach out back to her and see if I can get a different perspective on vocal coaching. So I'm gonna bug her at one point.
Yeah, absolutely.
But keep it up, dude. Super proud that you're doing what you do from Calgary. And if there's any way we can support you in the future, what do you got you have new stuff coming out? Is there anything that you want to talk about?
I do actually. Yeah, we actually just privately launched a really cool event that we're doing at the end of December. I'll send you an email after this with all the info on it. And it's, again, to get back into the marketing side for a second, it's like there's a million great songs, a million great artists, all these great things, but what kind of experience can you provide? So we're working on my next record right now with Justin and Spencer and the whole crew. And we're actually going to be doing a live recording session at OCL Studios where we have 40 people in audience in the room with us while we're recording the music. Everyone gets their own set of headphones and they get to sit in the room and while we bring the songs to life and record the session. And that's going to be happening December 21st. So we just did like a soft launch yesterday to a bunch of my super fans and supporters and people who have been really invested in what I'm doing over the years, and sent the email out to them first to give kind of those folks the first opportunity to be a part of it, because there's only 40 tickets.
Right.
And if the 40 doesn't sell out, we end pre-sale tonight. And then we're going to launch to the public tomorrow with the remaining tickets. And we've got a bunch of amazing sponsors on board. We've got a bunch of different packages as well. So you can buy just like a general admission ticket, for $50 that comes with a bunch of things. There's a $75 upgrade that comes with limo transportation to and from Ranchman, so you don't have to drive out to the studio. You can enjoy a few drinks, don't have to worry about that. Then there's a $100 option, which is like the producer experience. So you get to sit in the control room while Justin oversees the project, and you get to hear all the behind the scenes and hear him talking to us in our ears and what he has to say. And then there's a VIP package that is sponsor a song on the record. You get private pickup and drop off in a Carter Cadillac Escalade and get your name mentioned in the record as well when it comes out. And so there's a few different options that can kind of hit a bunch of different folks at a bunch of different levels.
Is there a package where I can be a backup singer and fake guitar playing, but get my picture taken? Because that's the one that I'd like to buy.
I think we can do that with a normal package after we hit the stop button on the record. No.
Dang it. Okay. Yeah. You don't want my voice on there anyways. It's not so pretty. That's amazing. Is there somewhere that, it's going to be too late? Unfortunately, this is going to come out after Christmas. But I can post. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build an awesome little teaser of this, and I'll put it out right away. Cool. Is there somewhere like will it be on devincoopermusic.com? Where can they find that info?
Yes, tomorrow we're launching it for the public. So tomorrow it'll get launched on Instagram. Tickets will be available. They're on Show Pass. It'll be on my website. All the promo material will be out, and then I'll send you an email as well that we had sent out to all the people at first. So
I love it, dude. That's
see
amazing.
All the behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's super cool. I'll chat with my wife. If she doesn't want to go, I'll come. And if she wants to come, I'll take her on a date night. So
amazing.
That'd be really, what time of day does that happen?
It's going to be in the evening. So doors are at 6 and then it'll be all over and done by 10. And it's Thursday, December 21st. So
super cool. If I'm not at the Nutcracker watching ballet, I'll be there. I love it.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much. Good luck with that. We'll chat as you move through and you got more stuff, or if you come up with other amazing marketing ideas that you think you can help others move their career through. I'm a full fan of rising tides help all boats float.
Absolutely.
So, like good ideas, like the world's so big that, you might have a couple direct competitors in Calgary, but like, everyone can learn from everybody. So many things, and everybody doing better helps everybody. So if there's anything you ever want to share, please get back to me. Love to have you on again. I find you intriguing, and your music is fantastic. Everybody, you can find it at devincoopermusic.com. And everyone, thanks for joining in for our sort of little spotlights that we've been doing on music industry. Devin, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Jamie. It was great chatting with you, and I'm sure we could talk for hours and hours more. So I have to grab a coffee and get together again sometime.
Yeah, we'll do it on the mic. Why not? It's good for you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, brother. I'll call you, and we'll book some tickets.
Perfect. Thanks, Jamie.
Appreciate it. Thanks.